All right, let's dive in. Today we're cracking open a classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, this one is a game changer, for sure. It's not just about, tips and tricks.
Right, it's about building a solid foundation. It's like you're not just putting on a Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. It's about getting to the root of effectiveness.
And this book really digs into that, right? I mean, if you're looking to understand those core principles, this is the place to start.
Absolutely. Covey lays it all out, and he starts with this idea of the character ethic.
Okay, yeah, so the character ethic. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Sure. It's the idea that true effectiveness comes from, your character, your principles, things like integrity, fairness, humanity.
So it's less about techniques for climbing the ladder or winning friends and more about who you are at your core.
Exactly. It's the opposite of what he calls the personality ethic, which is all about those quick fixes, the surface level stuff.
Which, let's be honest, a lot of us have probably tried at some point. I know I've fallen into that trap.
Oh yeah, we all have. But Covey is saying that lasting change, real effectiveness, comes from the inside out.
I love how he illustrates this with the story of that father who's struggling to connect with his son.
Oh yeah, that one really hits home. He's trying to pump up his son with all these positive affirmations.
But it's not working, is it?
Not at all. Because deep down, the father believes his son is fundamentally inadequate, and that belief, it sabotages everything.
It's like he's sending mixed messages. His words are saying one thing, but his actions, or maybe even just his energy, are saying something totally different.
That's the power of our paradigms. Our paradigms, they're the mental maps we use to navigate the world.
So if your map is wrong, you're going to end up lost, no matter how hard you try.
Exactly. It's like trying to use a map of Detroit to get around Chicago. You'll end up going in circles. The father in the story, he needed what Covey calls a paradigm shift.
A paradigm shift. So a fundamental change in how he sees his son and maybe even himself?
Exactly. It's about changing the lens through which we view the world. And this is where the character ethic comes in. It's about aligning ourselves with principles that are timeless and universal.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we shift those paradigms?
Well, it starts with awareness. You got to examine the lens you're using. Ask yourself, is this lens giving me an accurate view? Is it serving me well?
It's like taking a step back and saying, wait a minute, is this how I really want to see things? Is this belief actually true?
Exactly. And sometimes those deeply ingrained beliefs, they're tough to shake, but it's essential if we want to move towards true effectiveness.
It reminds me of that Emerson quote, "What you are shouts so loudly in my ears that I cannot hear what you say." Our character, our actions, they speak volumes.
Absolutely. You can't just talk the talk. You got to walk the walk. And that takes us to the concept of proactivity.
Proactivity. So much more than just taking initiative.
Right. It's about taking responsibility for your own choices and actions, not just reacting to circumstances.
He talks about the circle of influence versus the circle of concern.
Yeah, and this is so powerful. Reactive people, they focus on things they can't control, like the weaknesses of others, problems in the world.
She's constantly complaining and blaming, right?
Yeah, they're stuck in that victim mentality. But proactive people, they focus their energy on things they can influence. Their own habits, their attitudes, their responses to challenges.
So shifting that focus from what's wrong with the world to what can I do to make things better?
Exactly. Yeah. And the amazing thing is that by focusing on your circle of influence, you actually expand it. Covey uses the example of Gandhi.
Oh, Gandhi, yeah. He started with himself, right? His own internal transformation.
Exactly. And from there, his circle of influence expanded to encompass the liberation of an entire nation.
So inspiring. So we've got the foundation, character, ethic, paradigm shifts, proactivity. But where do we go from here? How do we actually put these principles into action in our daily lives?
Well, that's where the maturity continuum comes in. Covey says we all start life in a state of dependence, relying on others.
Makes sense. We're literally dependent on our caregivers when we're babies.
Right. And then we move towards independence, becoming self-reliant.
That's a natural progression, becoming more capable and taking ownership of our lives.
But Covey says the ultimate goal is interdependence. It's about recognizing that we can achieve so much more together than we ever could alone.
It's like that old saying, it takes a village.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you can't really contribute to the village if you're still relying on everyone else to take care of you, right?
So true. You got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet before you can effectively link arms with others.
Precisely. True independence is a prerequisite for effective interdependence.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So mastering those first three habits, moving from dependence to independence, those are like the foundation for everything
They
else.
are. It's like you can't build a house on a shaky foundation. You need that solid base to support everything else.
So the next three habits, those are more about like building those effective relationships and collaborating with others.
Got it. Covey calls it public victory.
Public victory, huh? I like the sound of that.
It's about achieving success through win-win solutions, through genuine collaboration, not about winning at the expense of others.
That's what we're all about here. So we're going to dive into those public victory habits in the next part of our deep dive.
That's going to be good.
All right, stay tuned because things are about to get really interesting.
Well,
Welcome back to our deep dive on those 7 habits, those habits for highly effective people. We were just getting to the good stuff, those public victory habits.
yeah, those are where the real magic starts to happen, where we start to see how all this inner work translates into outer success.
And habit 4 is all about, well, thinking win-win. But what does that actually look like in real life?
It's about approaching interactions with this belief that there's a solution out there that benefits both parties. It's not about one person getting their way at the expense of the other,
So no more I win, you lose mentality.
Yeah. It's about collaboration, not competition. And this is where understanding the 6 paradigms of human interaction is crucial.
6 paradigms. Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. So you got win-win, obviously, where both parties come out ahead.
That's the ideal, right? Everyone's happy.
Exactly. Then you got win-lose, where one person gets their way and the other, well, they lose out.
That's pretty common, right? Especially in like competitive environments.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's lose-win, where one person gives in and lets the other person have their way.
So not exactly a recipe for healthy relationships.
Not really, no. It often leads to resentment and bottled up emotions. Then there's lose-lose, where both parties end up worse off.
Oof, that sounds rough, like a downward spiral.
It can be. It often happens in really contentious situations where people are so focused on hurting the other person that they end up hurting themselves in the process.
That's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, right?
Exactly. Then you got win, where a person is only concerned with their own outcome, regardless of the impact on others.
So basically just looking out for number 1.
Yep. And finally, there's win-win or no deal. This is a powerful one. It means if a mutually beneficial solution can't be found, it's better to just walk away from the deal altogether.
I like that. It's about knowing your worth and not settling for less than you deserve.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Think win-win isn't just a negotiation tactic, It requires a fundamental shift in thinking.
Okay, so it's got to come from within.
It does. It requires developing these 3 character traits: integrity, maturity, and the abundance mentality.
All right, unpack those for us.
Sure. Integrity is all about living in alignment with your values and keeping your commitments. It builds trust, which is essential for win-win. Maturity is the balance between courage and consideration.
So being able to stand up for what you believe in while also respecting the viewpoints of others.
Exactly. And the abundance mentality, that's a real game changer.
Okay, what's that all about?
It's the belief that there's plenty out there for everyone.
Instead of seeing it as a pie where someone has to lose a slice for you to gain one.
Yeah, it's the opposite of that scarcity mentality, which leads to competition and hoarding of resources. With an abundance mentality, you see the pie is ever expanding, with plenty for everyone.
I love that. It's not just about material resources either.
Right? It's about opportunities, relationships, even happiness.
So how does this abundance mentality help us create those win-win situations?
Well, it allows you to see possibilities where others might only see limitations. It's about collaborating to create something bigger and better than either of you could have achieved on your own.
It's like 1 + 1 = 3, or even 10.
Exactly. It's synergy in action. Covey tells a story about a group of shopping center owners who are having all these problems with their tenants.
Problems like what?
Oh, late rent payments, complaints, just general friction. And instead of seeing these problems as a nuisance, they decided to shift their focus from, collecting rent to helping tenants thrive.
Yeah. So they adopted an abundance mentality and saw the potential for collaboration instead of conflict.
Precisely. They started offering business advice, helping tenants connect with resources, even creating community events. And guess what? Their tenant retention rates skyrocketed. The whole shopping center became a more vibrant and successful place for everyone.
That's such a powerful example of how shifting your mindset can lead to real, tangible results.
It is. It reminds me of that PPC balance. Covey talks about the balance between production, like achieving results, and production capability, which is nurturing the relationships and resources that make those results possible.
Right, like you can't just keep squeezing the orange for juice without taking care of the tree, right?
Exactly. It's about playing the long game, investing in those relationships, and building that foundation of trust and mutual benefit.
Which brings us to habit 5, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Such a simple idea, but man, it can be so hard to put into practice.
It is. Think about it. Most of us spend way more time learning how to speak and write than we do learning how to truly listen. We're so focused on getting our point across that we often fail to really understand where the other person is coming from.
I'm so guilty of that.
We all are. It's human nature.
Mhm.
But Covey's saying that if we want to build those win-win relationships, we got to get better at listening, at truly understanding the other person's perspective.
Okay, so less talking, more listening. But how do we actually do that? Like, how do we become better listeners?
Well, it starts with recognizing that we all have different paradigms. Covey uses this analogy of the young woman optical illusion. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yeah, the one where, like, depending on how you look at it, you see either an old woman or a young woman. It's pretty trippy.
It is, and it perfectly illustrates how two people can look at the same thing and see something completely different. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about understanding that we each have our own unique lens through which we see the world.
So ditch the judgment, embrace the differences.
Exactly. And that's where empathic listening comes in. It's about stepping outside of your own paradigm and trying to see the world through the other person's eyes.
So it's not just about hearing the words, it's about understanding the feelings behind them.
Exactly. And it's about validating those feelings, even if you don't agree with them. It's about saying, hey, I hear you. I see where you're coming from. And that creates connection. That builds trust, which paves the way for those win-win solutions.
Makes sense. But let's be real, sometimes it's hard to even want to understand where the other person is coming from, especially if we're feeling, triggered or defensive.
Oh, absolutely. It takes a lot of emotional maturity to stay open and curious, especially in those heated moments. But that's where the real growth happens. That's where those deep, meaningful connections are forged.
Okay, so we've got think win-win, we've got seek first to understand. What's next?
Habit 6. Synergize.
Yeah.
This is where the real magic happens.
Synergy. I feel like that word gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean in this context?
Covey defines it as achieving results that are greater than the sum of their parts. It's about 1 + 1 = 3, or even 10. Think about a musical band, Each instrument plays a unique part. Individually they're good, but together they create a symphony that's way more powerful than any one instrument could create on its own. That's synergy in action.
I love that analogy.
It's about recognizing that we each have our own strengths and weaknesses, and that by coming together, we can create something truly extraordinary.
Okay, so synergy is about embracing those differences, seeing them as assets rather than, obstacles.
Exactly. It's about leveraging those differences to create something new and innovative. Covey shares this story about a husband and wife who are trying to decide on a vacation.
Oh, I can already see this turning into a classic battle of the wills scenario.
Right. It's so easy to get stuck in that my way or the highway mentality. But this couple, they decided to do things differently. The husband wanted to go fishing and camping in some remote area. The wife wanted to visit her mother in another state. So instead of getting stuck in that power struggle, they sat down and talked about their underlying needs.
So what were they each hoping to get out of the vacation?
Exactly. And through that open, honest communication, they came up with this amazing third alternative.
The third alternative?
Yeah, a solution that neither of them had even considered before.
Mm.
They decided to visit the wife's mother and then spend a few days camping and fishing in a nearby state park. So they both got what they wanted, and they got to create this new shared experience together.
That's so cool.
It is, and it perfectly illustrates the power of synergy. It's about thinking outside the box, coming up with creative solutions that meet everyone's needs.
It's about seeing those differences as opportunities for growth and innovation rather than, sources of conflict.
Exactly. And it all starts with that willingness to listen, to understand, to value those different perspectives.
Wow, I'm starting to see how these habits really build on each other, they're all interconnected pieces of the puzzle.
They are. And that brings us to the final and arguably most important habit, sharpen the saw.
Okay, so last time we left off talking about sharpening the saw. This one really hit home for me. It's all about like self-renewal, and that really resonates with me. It's like taking a break to sharpen your tools so you can work more effectively, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. We're not machines. We can't just keep going and going without taking time to like recharge and renew ourselves.
Hmm.
And it needs to happen in all those different dimensions:
Yeah.
physical, spiritual, mental, and social, emotional.
So we talked about the physical dimension last time, right? Like taking care of our bodies.
Yeah, through exercise, nutrition, and sleep. It's the foundation, really.
Right, like you can't build a house on a shaky foundation. And we touched on the spiritual dimension too, right?
Yeah, connecting with your core values, finding that sense of inner peace, it's essential.
Okay, so what about the mental dimension? How do we sharpen the saw mentally?
Well, think of your mind as a muscle. Like you wouldn't expect to run a marathon without training, right?
Yeah.
You can't expect to be mentally sharp and engaged if you're not actively exercising your mind.
So it's about more than just like watching Netflix.
Definitely. It's about engaging in activities that challenge you intellectually.
Yeah.
Expand your knowledge, broaden your perspective. Could be reading books, taking courses, having those stimulating conversations, learning a new skill. It's about keeping that mind active and engaged.
I've noticed that when I'm learning something new, I just feel more energized and engaged in all areas of my life. Like my whole outlook shifts.
That's that upward spiral Covey talks about. Renewal leads to growth, which leads to more renewal and, well, so on.
It's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. And it applies to all areas of life, not just mental. Remember that fitness goal example from before?
Oh, yeah. So, like, if you start exercising and you start to feel healthier, you're more likely to keep exercising and get even healthier.
Precisely. It creates this upward spiral of well-being.
Yeah.
And it all starts with taking that first step, making that initial investment in yourself.
It's like that saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. Sharpen the saw is about equipping ourselves for a lifetime of growth.
Exactly. It's about becoming self-reliant, not just in the physical sense, but in all dimensions of our being.
Okay, so that brings us to the fourth dimension, social emotional.
This one's all about nurturing your relationships with others. It's about recognizing that we're not meant to go through life alone. We need those connections, that sense of belonging.
It's interesting. We tend to put so much emphasis on individual achievement that we often neglect this aspect of well-being. Like, I'll focus on relationships once I've achieved X, Y, and Z. But Covey is saying that nurturing those relationships is actually essential for effectiveness in all areas of life.
He is. Think about it. When you have those strong, supportive relationships, you've got a network of people you can rely on. People who encourage you, offer different perspectives, celebrate your successes.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner.
Exactly. And remember the emotional bank account.
Oh, yeah, making deposits through acts of kindness, courtesy, keeping commitments. And those withdrawals happen when we break promises or act disrespectfully.
Sharpening the saw in this social emotional dimension is all about making those consistent deposits, being present in your interactions, listening empathetically, offering support, celebrating each other's wins.
So it's not just about scheduling like quality time with your loved ones. It's about how you show up in your daily interactions.
Yes. It's about being intentional, weaving those principles of effectiveness into the fabric of your relationships.
And here's the thing I've noticed. When you're taking care of yourself physically, spiritually, and mentally, you're just naturally more capable of showing up as your best self in your relationships.
It's all interconnected. When you feel good, you're more likely to make others feel good too.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls. You open one and there's another inside and another. Each dimension of Sharpen the Saw is nested within the others. It creates this beautiful, holistic approach to personal growth.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
You're never going to arrive at some perfect state of effectiveness. It's about continuous improvement, always striving to become the best version of yourself.
So it's not about being perfect, it's about progress.
Exactly. And Sharpen the Saw gives you the tools to embark on that journey.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling incredibly inspired. This has been such an insightful deep dive into these 7 habits. It's a powerful reminder that investing in ourselves is not selfish, it's essential. And it's not just about us either. When we're taking care of ourselves, we're better equipped to show up for others, contribute to our communities, and make a positive impact on the world.
Well said. That's the beauty of it all. It's a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely. So if you're looking for a roadmap to a more fulfilling and effective life, we highly recommend checking out this book. It's a classic for a reason.
And remember, you are your greatest asset. Take care of yourself, nurture your relationships, and never stop learning and growing.
Wise words to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 7 habits of highly effective people. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Until next time, keep those saws sharp.